Hi, I told you the second video was going to be about stitching, how to stitch the whip stitch and the blanket stitch and the stem stitch. However, I realized I need to give you a few more tips about fusing, cutting out your shapes, the pieces in your block one that are actually sewn together, and then your pieces cut out of the pieced wool. I wanted to give you those tips before we talked about the actual stitching. So that'll actually be a third video. I will show you how to do those stitches. So this video is going to be some tips on if you use the fusible, how to work with the fusible, how to cut it out, and just some tips that I have found along the way working with wool. So I had shown you my piece of Heat and Bond that had all of the pieces from the pattern traced on there. I cut those pieces apart. They're all labeled. They match the labels that you're going to see in your kit. So once you've traced everything, it should be easy to look at your kit, look at a piece of wool. They all have labels on them like this, and so you'll be able to match up your fusible traced pieces with your wool. Once you have cut them apart and you've lined them up with the appropriate color of wool, you are going to then take that piece of wool with the fusible over to your iron. Now, Heat and Bond Light, you will want a little bit of steam. You're going to go ahead and lay your wool down, lay your fusible pieces on top, put the iron down, give it a little steam, I'd say 4 or 5 seconds, and then let it sit. I've had a lot of people that have taken my classes over the last couple of years, and they tell me that they can't get the fusible to stick. Part of that is they might not be using the correct fusible. I've always had success with Heat and Bond Light. That's why I like it. One of the other reasons I find that it won't stick is if you fuse it down and then you immediately pick it up, they can shift. And if they shift, they can come off the wool. This is the same if you're working with cotton as well. Basically, any fusible you work with, it's a glue. So you're heating it up. You want to let it cool before you move it, because basically by letting it cool, the adhesive, the glue part, is going to then stick to whatever it is stuck to, and then it won't move, and you should not have a problem with your fusible coming up. So I usually fuse it down 4 or 5 seconds, and then I just let it sit there. 30 seconds, 40 seconds is plenty of time. It'll start to cool off, and then you can move it. Once you've got everything fused, then you're going to cut those pieces out right on the line. I like a pair of scissors like this. This is a 5-inch pair of scissors. This has a serrated edge. I just like the way that that cuts. It doesn't have to be a serrated edge. These are from a company called Kai, K-A-I. I found them in Houston. You can find them in some quilt stores. You can probably find them online as well. Havel is another company that makes a really nice pair of 5-inch serrated scissors. Fiskars also has serrated scissors. You can find those in most craft stores. So I use these scissors and I cut out my pieces. So if I were going to cut this out, I'm going to cut it right on the line, and then I'm going to have a piece like this. So this is one of my leaves. The paper you see is on the side, and I can still see what I've labeled it as. And I just set that aside. Now I want to talk to you about the pieces in your block one that the designer actually went to the sewing machine, pieced 2 pieces of wool together, and then trace them. So you're going to have 3 larger leaves that you're going to do this on, as well as a lot of smaller leaves that get fused down on top of the vase. So in your packet, or in your kit, when you have pieces of wool that are labeled for this particular block, it's C, is the bigger pieced blocks, but it's also some other things. So my suggestion is fuse the other pieces on as kind of close to the edge as possible, so then you can cut that off, and then you will sew these two pieces together like this. So this is another pieced wool. I just used regular cotton thread, 1/4 inch seam. Once you piece that together, you want to press it open. Take it to your iron and press it open like this one. So here's another one. You can see that I've pressed it open. Then what you're going to do is, you've traced this leaf, you see the seam is drawn down the middle, you'll see that on your pattern, and then on the wrong side of your pieced wool, you're going to line that center seam up with the center of the seam that you've sewn on your machine, like this. And then you'll take it to the iron and you will press it 4 or 5 seconds, give it a little bit of steam, let it sit. So here's one that I've already pressed on the seam. These are the little ones that are going to end up on top of your vase. So you'll just fuse it straight down that seam, and then when you cut them out, you're going to have little leaves like this with the seam, with the seam right down the middle. So you're going to have several of these little ones, and you're going to have 3 of the larger ones. On the larger ones, I will say, pay attention to which side is which color. So when you look at your picture, you can see which side, for instance, the red and purple leaf, look to see which side the red leaf is, and that way you can fuse it down on the appropriate side. Flip your leaf whichever direction, and then flip it over so you can make sure that the color is on the right side. Once you have everything cut out, my suggestion to get it placed and fused all the way down on your background is find the middle of your background by folding it in half and then folding it in half again. I placed a little pin, so this top hole here is the center of my background. Find the center of your pattern. So all I did on this was I folded my pattern up so that I could find the center. Remember, it's not centered on this page, so you want to find the center one way, then fold it again, and I drew a little dot where the center is, which actually ends up being kind of right in the middle of that G leaf that's hanging over. And then what I would do is, now that you have where the center is, you can start placing your pieces. Pay attention to your picture. Pay attention to this pattern. It shows you what has to overlap each thing. And then go ahead and start at the bottom and start layering everything. And again, when I fuse this down, you can fuse as you go. When you get that vase where you want it, with the rim or the neck and then the rim, you can go ahead and